How can I achieve my full potential?
You already have.
What?
Seriously, you've already peaked.
I came to Human Resources for some guidance.
That's what tipped me off. Alice, you have to use your vacation time or you'll lose it. But if you take time off, you'll miss your deadlines. Ooh.
The job market is getting worse every day.
Ooh, excellent.
Employees will be afraid. Our power to abuse them grows stronger by the minute. Stop it! Stop doing the evil dance. You're killing me.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of ERG Powertalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. The clip you just saw humorously portrays HR through the lens of Dilbert's Catbird, the evil HR director, but it only scratches the surface of how employees really feel about HR. Distrust and dislike of HR are widespread today. Originally, HR was created in the early 1900s as an employee advocate to address grievances and improve workplace conditions to deter unionization. However, by the late 20th century, HR shifted from employee advocacy to serving business interests. This deepened the trust gap between employees and HR, and in recent years, this gap has been further widened by corporate scandals and employees sharing negative HR experiences on social media, where HR often appears to side with executives even when employee rights are violated. In today's discussion, we'll focus on how ERG community leaders can support their members in navigating these challenges and finding the direction and support they need, whether through internal HR or alternative sources. And to help us with that, we have the perfect guest. But before we introduce our guest, let's take a moment to review our mission and acknowledge our supporters. This is ERG Power Talk, and I'm your host, Joe Santana. The purpose of ERG Power Talk is to provide a virtual forum for the exchange of great ideas and inspiration for ERG leaders as well as others interested in supporting ERGs. With ERG Power Talk, there is no more waiting until the next conference and praying that you get the budget to travel to the conference to find great ideas and stimulation toward action. Just subscribe and listen at your convenience. Before we begin, a quick note of thanks to our supporters: Atrium Health, Freighted Health and Wisconsin Medical College, Hiscox, Lee Health, National Audubon Society, Tapestry, Oshkosh Corporation, UL Solutions, and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Now, let's go straight to the program. She is the visionary founder and CEO behind Worklution Inc. and Cage Bird HR, with a dynamic background that includes strategic HR roles at industry giants like Google and ExxonMobil. She offers a wealth of experience in talent management, DEI, and labor relations. Her innovative work at Cage Bird HR is reshaping the HR landscape by offering independent, employee-centered support, challenging the more recent employer business partner focused model, and setting new standards for how HR can truly serve workers in a modern, evolving workplace.
My name is Cierra Gross. I am the founder and CEO of Worklution, and we bill ourselves as a future of work solutions brand, under which we have two organizations or functions, if you will. One is that one that you mentioned, which is our flagship brand, Cage Bird HR, and we provide employees access to independent HR support. Our second, which is pre-revenue, pre-launch, which is launching in the next 2 weeks, is Work Receipts, which is a mobile application designed to easily help employees track and send their work records as far as what happens at work and get instant AI-powered guidance from an employee advocate. So I'm so happy to be here. I think this conversation is very important, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Happy to have you here, Cierra, and thank you for joining us today on ERG Power Talk. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. And just to kick off and dive into this, I want to ask you, what inspired you to personally set off on your current path, providing what you call employee-centered support?
Yeah, I think what inspired me was my own experience with workplace trauma. I think I have a similar story to most folks who enter into the working world at some point or another, and particularly in corporate America, where, I'm super ambitious and ready to kind of solve all the world's problems. But then, my identity as an African American woman subjected me to, quite a few isms in the workplace. And those isms and that experience sent me into depression for the first time in my life. And I was one of the lucky ones who was able to survive that experience, partially because of my technical understanding of HR and what the rules are and what companies can and cannot do. And out of that experience, I was actually going to take a sabbatical just to try to find myself again. And in planning, I was like, oh, I should probably, do some work just to keep in touch with what's going on in the HR circuit. And so I just thought, I was able to manage this situation because I have a technical background in human resources, but most employees don't. And so I just said, I will offer people my time as an objective HR professional to, give them guidance and help them understand what their rights and options are from a human resources perspective. And so I literally slapped up a website, and an hour later, somebody had booked an appointment. And so this whole thing really started out of a desire for me to just simply help people, and it's become something much bigger than that. But the origin story of it is more similar to most everyday employee, and just I had a terrible experience at work, and instead of going back into that environment, I decided to do something different.
It sounds like what you did was you literally created a role for yourself that let you do what you originally set out to do that you found you couldn't do. Based on
Correct.
the constraints that were around you, which is really quite creative and brilliant. You talk about how HR moved away from its role as the employee advocate, even though sometimes it's billed as an employee advocacy. But in reality, when you get underneath the actual cover there, what you find is that a lot of it has to do with business alignment and trying to echo and support the business agenda. So when did that happen exactly? I know I mentioned it happened in the latter part of the 1900s because it started out being that advocacy role because companies didn't want employees to unionize. And so they felt, hey, if we give them somebody they could talk to who can give them support and all that stuff, then they won't need to go out and form a union. But somewhere along the line, where was it where organizations and HR said, we don't need to do that anymore. We pretty much can now realign ourselves with the business. When did that shift begin and how did it evolve?
Yeah, so I think, HR has played a lot of different roles, right? As corporate America has evolved, we went from, hey, here's your own internal employee advocate to kind of a party planning, welcome to the company, here's the bathroom, here's your desk kind of role. And I think around 25 years ago, the function decided that it no longer wanted to be reactive and it wanted this, what we call the proverbial seat at the table, and that we wanted to drive business outcomes through, the human capital of a company. And I'm not necessarily against that positioning. I think where we went wrong is that we leaned too far into it and there's no balance right now, right? And so when you talk about HR professionals, Forbes just did an article the other day, probably about a month ago, around how HR professionals in and of ourselves are miserable with the function because we all kind of join HR because we enjoy developing people. We like working with people. We like helping people along on this journey. And then you get into the function and you quickly kind of realize that you're going to do way less of that than you thought. And your role is essentially to make sure that you are, reducing risk for the organization at, oftentimes at the expense of employees and their mental and physical well-being. And so I think one of the things about Cage Bird HR that, most people really don't talk about is the fact that we're giving HR professionals the opportunity to come and work for the organization and to do the work that they thought they were going to do when they joined HR. So now when we post the role, there's hundreds, 300-400 HR professionals from around the country who are dying to come and do this work because people are looking for work that aligns with their core values. They're looking for feel-good work and they're looking for work that is meaningful.
As we were talking before we started the interview, I would say the bulk of the HR people that I've met are some of the most altruistic, caring people. They care about developing people. A lot of them get certificates and training in areas like coaching, which again shows that tendency. They want to develop people and so forth. And I love something that you said that I think brings it home, which is that there's nothing wrong with HR aligning with the business and being business focused. Just like there's nothing wrong with employee resource groups that take on roles and responsibilities that help their business. But I think that where things get lost is that those things should be an and, not an or. And when they become an or, and it's, well, we're not going to do anything for our community anymore because we're only going to be focused on how we can help the business. It's just another job at that point, an unpaid job in most cases, but it's another job. It's no longer something that is addressing some of your passion. And I think the same thing happens with HR professionals when they come into an organization. And they, of course, are more than happy and capable of helping the organization to grow its revenue, grow its profitability, and expand its footprint. But that is something that can be in addition to their advocacy that they do with helping the employees in the organization. And there needs to be a balance in there. And there needs to be a guiding ethics of principles and so forth of when you lean a little bit one way and when you lean the other so that you can moderate that. So how have people like yourself, besides, going off and starting your own company and building a business around your passion, how are HR people in most organizations coping with this? Like, what do they do in response to this culture or ethos of the focus is on the business and being a business partner, and that is it, period, full stop? How do they cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can't speak for all HR professionals, but the ones in my network, I think there's a quite a bit of disassociation that people are going through just to kind of separate the work from who they are as people to the best of their ability. Because a lot of the times, the work and people's morals, those two things come into conflict when we're not following HR policy or there's inconsistent application of policy for some as opposed to others. And so, I think we live in capitalist society and people have to pay their bills and take care of their families. And until there is an alternative where people can find work that is meaningful to them, I think, most people do what they have to do to provide for themselves. And I don't necessarily, think anything is wrong with that. I think we should focus on the system that is forcing people into these, to make these decisions around, do I do work that is aligned with who I am, or do I provide for my family? Right. And I think that's what we offer, not only at Cage Bird, but at all the brands at Worklution.
So that's the next question I was going to ask you, Cierra, because I know that you do work with employees. I read the article where there are employees who literally call you instead of going to their own HR group because they want HR advice, but they want to make sure that the confidentiality and that the person they're talking to is in their corner to some degree or completely versus getting into a compromised situation. But my question is, do you also provide HR professionals inside organizations with advice or any guidance on how they can balance those roles as well? And before you answer that the same applies in some cases to other roles inside the organization, even volunteer roles like running community groups and so forth. But how, do you do that? And if so, how do you do that?
Well, I think it's important to say that there's no job that we haven't supported. From HR professionals to the CHRO to the CEO. I mean, people would assume that we only support, entry level, young kids who are just now coming to corporate America, but that's just not true. So we do support HR professionals. A lot of the times it's more so because they themselves have gotten into something at work and they need to figure out, how do I navigate this? Not because they don't know the rules. They just don't know what should they do first, second, and if there's anything else to consider. But as far as helping HR professionals kind of find this balance and between, work that feels good and showing up to provide for themselves, we currently do not do that type of work. But perhaps we should. Something to think about.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity there, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I think that
Yeah, for
people
sure.
that do this work, again, I think that HR people, and I know quite a few, I actually came out of the business and not HR, but
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to work with a lot of HR people over the course of my career, especially after I got into the DEI space. And
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that they were all people whose heart was in that
In the
place of,
right
I want to
place.
help people. I want to
Yeah.
develop people. I want the organization to be successful as a result of people who are engaged, happy, fulfilled, growing, and all that good stuff. So I would imagine for them it's frustrating as well.
Yeah.
So what did we learn about the corporate HR function in the first half of our discussion with Cierra? 1, initially the function we call the HR department was created to address employee grievances internally and deter employees from joining or forming unions. However, as the fear of unionization declined in the late 20th century, HR slowly shifted their focus solely to reducing risk and protecting the organization's reputation. 2, this shift away from addressing employee needs and grievances created an ever-widening trust gap, with employees viewing HR as biased in favor of the company's executives, especially in cases where employee rights were violated. Using a legal analogy, some employees were surprised to learn that HR was not their lawyer, but rather the employer's lawyer, representing and protecting the employer's interests even at the expense of the employee. 3, many HR professionals are frustrated with this new model, finding their original altruistic aims of employee development at odds with their current roles and leadership's demand of them, the reduction of organizational risk. Some also realized that completely ignoring employee needs creates risk for the company. 4, as a result of this frustration, former corporate HR professionals sometimes simply leave these jobs to form coaching organizations and advisory groups. In the case of Cierra, she built an independent employee-centered support practice that fills the void left by corporate HR departments. So not a union, but rather an individual employee advisory and advocacy function. And finally, 5, there are many HR professionals today who would love to create a balance between their role reducing corporate risk and providing employee advocacy, a balance that is largely non-existent in most organizations today. To that end, HR's biggest need in its efforts to restore its positive relationship with the workforce is for information and insights that will enable them to more effectively carry out their role, protecting the business from workforce relation-related risks while supporting employee interests. In the next segment of our discussion with Cierra, we will explore the role of ERGs and what they can do to help HR professionals to reduce that gap and the accompanying frustration it produces for everyone. All this and more when we come back, but first this. I'll see you on the other side. Are you an ERG group or committee chair struggling to balance your ERG activities with your day job responsibilities? Well, you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of passionate ERG leads all around the world that find themselves in the same boat. The only solution found by many is to give up lunch hours and personal time with family and friends. But there is a better way, and that better way is to master the powerful skills that enable you to 1, set realistic and achievable compelling goals and priorities. 2, distribute the workload by effectively delegating tasks and responsibilities to others. 3, communicate in a way that increases your impact with less time and effort on your part. 4, secure the full and active support of executive sponsors and other senior business leaders. And 5, fit your ERG leadership work into a reasonable set of time boundaries. And that and more is exactly what tens of thousands of your colleagues have learned to do effortlessly by participating in Supercharge Workshops. Supercharge Workshops was developed by us along the same easy and powerful how-to framework found in our popular Supercharge Your ERGs book. The modular, customizable programs are loaded with fun exercises and tools that will immediately give you back hours of time each day while increasing your ability to achieve high impact and measurable results in both your ERG work and your job. For more details on how you can schedule a Supercharge Workshop session in your organization, go to superchargeworkshops.com. That's https:// Supercharge Workshops, one word with no spaces.com. So don't suffer silently. Take that first step towards stopping your struggle today. Check out Supercharge Workshops. So let's move over our tack to the ERG side of the ledger. So in a lot of organizations, employee resource groups are out there helping their communities. In many cases, they're asked to also engage in things that are helpful to the organization. And a lot of times those things that are going to be helpful to the organization fall under the umbrella of HR. They're not all there and they don't need to be there, but generally speaking, I think a lot of them do fall under that umbrella. What are some of the challenges you think that an employee resource group faces when dealing with that dynamic? And I say that because I think that HR being where it is in many cases in organizations is going to tend to pull them into that align with the business and come over to this side, and the side that has to do with employees is no longer going to get a focus. And we're dealing with a volunteer organization, right? The economic situation that you presented before doesn't apply here because somebody can simply say like, you know what, this does not align with what I want to do. And this is just like extra work for the company. I've already got a full-time job. I'm not doing this anymore. And they don't need to quit or sign off. They just don't show up anymore. So how do ERG leaders maintain that engagement with their members by supporting their members while at the same time threading that needle of also supporting the business?
ERGs are tricky, and every corporation I've ever been in, the first thing I did was join, the Black ERG or the Women at ERG. And as somebody who's deeply passionate about this work, what I've come to understand about ERGs is that they're hyper complex, right? You have people who are truly there to, influence outcomes. You have people who are there to, get closer to the corporate sponsor, which is likely some sort of director, vice president, executive, et cetera. And then you have this feeling of running in place where it's not really clear if the ERG is making any material progress or like what the purpose of the ERG is. And then sometimes you realize this is just a place of community, which I think is super important, especially now in, with this external environment that we're in, where ERGs are critical in just providing space for people with competing identities and different identities to have a safe space where they can go and find community. Because a lot of the times when we talk about workplace trauma, we're also talking about negative impacts to people's physical and mental health, and healing happens in community. I think the single most important thing that ERGs need to be more effective is access to data, right? So companies are really close chest with pay data, with diversity data, with information that ERGs could use to help further advocate and more effectively advocate for members of the ERG, right? So what I found is that we're going to, like, for example, when I was at Google, a young Black girl got followed to her desk by a white Googler who didn't know that she worked at Google. And there was a big uproar about it. And, we had a big meeting with Sundar and everything. And the ERG really didn't have any type of decision-making authority to be like, hey, this is really not okay. And we need to change the badging policy to remove this sentence that basically empowers all Googlers to police basically the office environment, right? And so instead of Googlers saying like, hey, show me your badge, the policy should have been updated to say, like, if you have thoughts around if somebody should be in the building, then call security and let security handle it. Don't follow people to their desk. And so when we asked, like, is there any data around how many times this happens? Like, does security keep any type of data on this? They basically were like, we're not, if we do know, we're not going to give it to you. And so when I think about this decentralization of employee data and information, that's where our other brand, Work Receipts, comes in, because right now employees there's no technology solution to track things that happen at work, right? So anybody you talk to pretty much tell you, we all start a new job, and the first thing we do is we create like a Word document. And when things happen to us, we write it down in this Word document. People are taking screenshots and recordings, but there's no real centralized place for this to all take place, nor is there a way for people to get kind of instant guidance on their rights and options at work. And so a function of the technologies that we get a lot of data, user data, and we have it from across the country. And this is happening right now on the Cage Bird side. We actually own the most comprehensive data set into the employee experience available anywhere, period. And so, and it's across the country, and it spans every single company that you could think of and those you can't. And so what it allows us to do is to take a deeper look inside what is actually happening to people, at what rate, and how can we make this available to a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, whether it be unions, whether it be colleges and universities, whether it be ERGs, so that companies are not holding on to the one thing that can be used to drive the world of work forward.
That is really a powerful tool. My other question is, if you are in an ERG community, right, and you're working with people who are in HR, and I think it's important to again, always restate that a lot of people that work in HR, they really care and they want to do certain things that are positive toward the employee body. Catbert and Dilbert aside, it's a cartoon and it's funny, but we're talking about human beings that go into a profession because they're caring people. And
Absolutely.
Is there anything that ERG community groups can do that would be helpful to HR professionals who want to engage in a positive, supportive way with employees? Is there anything that they can offer or any way that they can partner with these leaders who are so predisposed to help them to actually be able to do that?
Yeah, I think there's always opportunity to educate people on kind of the intricacies of how the function works, right? So over the past couple of years, what we've come to understand about employees and their understanding of HR is that it's a very, very low amount of information that people understand about human resources and how it works. And so I think that the more we can educate people on how how HR as a function works, and also what their rights and options are, I think ERG leaders can then in turn educate people. Of course, encouraging people to download Work Receipts would probably help, because it puts an AI employee advocate right on your phone and eliminates the need to prompt or question, right? So for the first time ever, all you have to do is tell the app what happened, and the app will then give you personalized guidance on what your rights and options are based on what state you live in. And so I think one of the single most important things ERGs can do and partner with HR is help to educate people, especially when you talk about people from underinvested communities. We use benefits the least out of everybody. We take less time off, we take less FMLA, we take less PFL, right? And I think that there's a cultural reason for that, but ERG leaders can help to kind of destigmatize some of these cultural norms that we have and encourage people to use the benefits, to understand HR, and to engage with the function in a healthy way.
And continuing with that, what are some other steps that these employee communities can take to help get their HR professionals who are so predisposed back to that center, not away from obviously the alignment with the business, because I know that is also critical, but bring them a little bit closer to the center. I was thinking, just if I could throw something out there, in many cases, these communities have vital information about the perspectives that people have who are in those communities about their experience in the company and what they actually like or don't like, what would make them more successful in the organization. And I think that's one way, is to bridge that disconnect, share in some safe way, share those perspectives with people who then have the ability
Yeah.
to do something about it, whether it's a combination of HR and their DEI leader within the organization. But share those perspectives, because one of the statistics I saw out there showed that HR leaders gave themselves a score in the 93 percentile when it came to how effective they thought their policies were in being inclusive and engaging everyone in their communities. The study also queried the employees of the very same company where those HR leaders worked, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 39%, right? That's a big perceptual gap between the people that are managing the human resources for an organization and probably the leaders above them, and the actual people who are doing the work in the day-to-day. And so what are some other things that you would advise ERG leaders could do to also help close gaps like that, help HR to be more effective on that advocacy side?
Yeah, I mean, I think ERG leaders can, again, find ways to get their own data, right? So whether that be polling members, asking what their preferences are, and then bringing those to leadership in a way to say like, hey, 99% of our members think that the badging policy should be changed. And here's all the reasons why that it would contribute to a safer and more inclusive work environment. I'm also of the personal opinion that none of this is new, right? Like we've been talking about the same problems in corporate America for quite some time. And so I think we all have a role to play. And for me specifically, I find that I am more impactful from outside of these institutions that have these kind of levees that you kind of have to navigate. When do you want to pull? When do you want to push? And I just prefer myself to do all the pushing from outside of the organization by creating my own organization in which these things are kind of like common sense, right? And I think being a tech founder, but I'm a HR professional first and foremost, I can build an organization with diversity, with HR at the forefront, as opposed to doing it on the back end, like most companies try to do. And then they try to force fit it into culture and it doesn't really have the same impact. And so I think, when you talk about ERG leaders, I think one, they need to just continue to advocate fiercely on behalf of these communities in ways that also add to the overall culture bottom line of the organization. Also continuing to collect their own data set and using that, because I come from Exxon, right? I'm from the school of nothing moves without data, right? And so making these arguments from a perspective of here's where we are as a group, and here are the things that we would like to see happen. And then also relying on outside data to then, make more comprehensive arguments as to why these things could happen or should happen. But like I said, we've been talking about this stuff for a long time. But at the end of the day, if a company doesn't want to do these things and they don't really care, then it's not going to happen, right? And so that's where organizations like mine come in, because I'm of the opinion, I want them all. I want all the she's, theys, and thems. I want all the diversity. I want all of them. I'm going to build an organization from day one that says that you're welcome here. And then when the talent pool dries up, then other companies will be forced to do something different. And then we'll have made impact.
So you already mentioned resources that are available through your organization. My question is, what other resources do you recommend? Books, websites? What is some information that's out there that people can utilize to really become smart about this stuff and to learn to better navigate?
Yeah, so we have our support library, which is on cagebreadhr.com/support. It has a ton of resources. I've also written ebooks on all kind of different subjects relative to the world of work and how to navigate. My next ebook that's coming out is called The Hire the Hostile Pipeline, which talks about how Black women are systemically pushed out of organizations. I would also encourage people to, and this is going to sound silly, but the amount of people who never read their employee handbook is gobsmacking. I think I would always say to people, read your employee handbook, because it tells you exactly what the policies are and exactly what benefits are available to you, so that you can take to help kind of survive this working world. I also think people should understand what external government organizations they have available to them, particularly for people who are in organizations that don't have HR, right? Because then they have to default first to state and federal agencies like the EEOC to help them and get support. So people should also know, how to access those resources as well.
There is a lot of information out there. And to your point about employee handbooks and about benefit handbooks, a lot of people do not read them. I actually, when I worked for large corporations, I would have people from time to time that would come up and say, the one thing I need is XYZ, and they don't have that around here. And I'd say yeah, they do. It's actually been a benefit here for the last, 7, 8 years, maybe. So in a lot of cases, I think that it's also of value if you become aware of things like that, to let other members of your community know about it as well. Maybe have a program where you have someone come in and talk about this stuff, because then they can make better use of what's available to them and work better with the tools that are already there. Cierra, one last question for you. How can our listeners reach you personally for more?
Yeah, so you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can search my name, Cierra Gross. My Instagram and my, TikTok, what they have me on is all Cierra.ceo. And then, of course, if you need HR support, independent HR support, you can book time at cagebreadhr.com. And for those who are interested in downloading work receipts, when it releases to the market in 2 weeks, you can go to workreceipts.com. So just WRKreceipts.com and sign up to be notified when the app is available.
Cierra, thank you again for being on ERG Power Talk. Okay, so here's what we got out of the second half of our discussion with Cierra. In a nutshell, ERG leaders can act as a bridge between their membership community and HR in several ways. One, by providing opportunities to educate their members on how HR really works relative to their rights and available benefits. This could be as simple as having an HR representative attend one of your group meetings after your members are encouraged to read the employee handbook to answer questions about topics like education benefits and paid family leave. Community members can also use this as an opportunity to directly inquire as to how the HR function in their company balances their employee advocacy role with their organizational risk reduction objectives. The goal is to provide members with clarity as to the role of HR relative to themselves within your particular organization, so that wrong assumptions don't lead to disconnects and disappointments. Two, once this is done, ERG leaders can play a big role in encouraging their community members to take advantage of benefits offered by the company. According to Cierra, members of underrepresented groups are currently the least likely to use all the company benefits available to them. Three, another thing ERG leaders can do is help close some of the gaps between what HR believes their community members want and what your community members actually want by gathering and presenting aggregate data from their communities. This data can be collected by polling members and running private group discussions on issues and sharing that aggregate data of the findings with DEI and HR. This can help HR address common disconnects that create risk for the company when HR and corporate leadership believe they're meeting employee needs while dissatisfied and unhappy employees are trashing the company's reputation in social media platforms. Here, ERG leaders can help by sharing insights on how employees in their communities say they're experiencing the workplace, thus helping HR professionals to close perception gaps on inclusivity. Four, in addition to this, ERG leaders can use this information collected from their communities to propose policy and practice changes that better support their membership communities. Perhaps you may learn that a particular reimbursement, healthcare, or PTO policy doesn't effectively support members of your community. You can communicate that to DEI and HR. After that, of course, it's up to HR to work with leadership to advocate for a change that will increase productivity and/or employee engagement and thus reduce risk. In any event, by using your access to community data and perspectives, you can help HR professionals to advocate for workplace policies that better serve your community's interests while helping HR to meet its employee engagement risk reduction objectives. And finally, 5, By creating a safe, supportive space for your community to express itself and its needs, you can help mitigate workplace trauma and reinforce a sense of belonging, reducing the risk of disengagement among underrepresented employees. And this also supports the HR mission while providing a tangible benefit to your membership community. I believe the big lesson in this discussion is neatly captured in a story I recently read about a bustling town divided by a wide, fast-moving river. On one side lived the workers, a community of skilled artisans and laborers. On the other side, the town's leadership and strategists held court, overseeing the operation and protecting the town's future. The two groups relied on each other for success, but over time, a gap of misunderstanding grew. The workers felt unheard, frustrated by what they perceived as distant and out of touch leaders. Meanwhile, the leaders believed they were making decisions that benefited the whole town, yet couldn't understand why morale was so low despite their efforts. They too were frustrated and felt bad knowing that the workers seemed to dislike them. Meanwhile, in the center of town stood a bridge that connected the two sides. For years, the bridge was neglected. People rarely crossed it except when absolutely necessary. One day, a group of the workers' community leaders decided to take action. They organized a town gathering at the bridge. They invited leaders to meet with them to share their perspectives, not in a formal meeting, but in an open, honest dialogue. Both sides came to the bridge, hesitant at first, but still willing to listen. The community leaders expressed the workers' frustrations with feelings of being overlooked, with policies that didn't seem to support them in doing their tasks and living happy, fulfilled lives. The leaders, in turn, through their representatives, shared the challenges of balancing risks and protecting the town's future, often unaware of the day-to-day struggles on the other side of the river. As the conversation unfolded, something shifted. Clarity began to form. The workers realized that the leaders weren't just enforcing rules, but managing risks and challenges to keep the town going. And the leaders, in turn, learned for the first time how their policies meant to engage workers and support performance sometimes fell short and actually created unwanted risks. By the end of the meeting, the bridge that had once been neglected became a symbol of connection. The worker community representatives and the leaders' representatives agreed to meet regularly, using the bridge as a place to exchange information and ideas. Over time, this newfound clarity transformed the town. Policies became more aligned with the needs of the workers, and the leadership felt more connected to the people they served. This led to the reduction of risk and the increase of prosperity for all. The old river still ran through the town, but it was no longer a divide. Like the community representatives and the representatives of the town leadership in this story, ERG leaders and HR professionals can play a huge role in working together to reduce perceptual divisions that reduce profitability and increase risk. Together, they can be the proverbial bridge that creates a stronger, more united community where everyone, including employees and HR professionals, thrive. Thank you for tuning in to ERG Power Talk. If you enjoyed and got value out of this program, please like us and leave a favorable review at your podcast provider's site. Also, invite others to listen to the show. By the way, contact me if you're looking for an ERG Symposium keynote or a leader for your strategy workshop, new chair onboarding, and or ERG bootcamp. I can run these for you either in person or in a virtual setting. Also, for more great ideas and tips for your ERGs, get my books, Supercharge Your ERGs, 18 Tips to Power Up Your ERG/BRG Strategy, and the new DEI and ERG Frontier, how you and your efforts can rise and thrive in the new world of constant disruption. Both available on Amazon.com. I'm Joe Santana. Thanks again for tuning in.